Hello, Tom.
How you doing, Shaun?
Yeah, doing great, man. How about yourself?
Fine, thanks. Long time no see.
Yeah, thank you for rejoining us.
Sure, sure.
Previously, we talked about Manson, the CIA, MK Ultra. Absolutely fascinating.
Hmm.
We have a much shorter window of time this evening, so I'll get straight into it. But for people watching this, then who are not familiar with your work, Tom, do you just want to say a little bit about you, please?
Yeah. I published a book about a year and a half ago called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. And it was a book that began as a magazine article in 1999 when I was asked to commemorate in a story that what was then going to be the 30th anniversary of the Manson murders. And a very long story short, the article started growing beyond its perimeters and became a book. But the book took me 20 years to finally complete because I went beyond the Manson murders when I found out that most of what we've been told about that case was a lie. And when I found out what it was covering up and what it was falsely presenting, led to a lot of other stories, including the CIA's involvement in a lot of domestic activities in the 60s. Well, actually, going back to the 50s through the 60s. And I stopped in the early 70s. I didn't really want to look beyond that because I was already having too much stuff for one book.
So, is this book getting optioned then into a series?
It actually was optioned based on the book proposal in 2017. The second book proposal, I had a deal prior to that with another publisher, and they got impatient, canceled the deal, and sued me for the return of the advance, which was a pain in the butt. But when we did the second book proposal, Amazon Studios purchased it, optioned the book for a feature film. And at the time, I was flat broke and in debt to the prior publisher, and I had no say over whether it would be a limited series or a feature. And I had to agree to that in order to get the money to support me for what was going to be the final 3 years. So Amazon renewed the option. They had it 2 times 18 months, whatever that is. But then they pulled the plug this past November, December on the feature project. Unfortunately for the writer and the producer, who I really liked, who were kind of shepherding it along, they decided, or they told the writer and producer, they didn't want to have older, white, middle-aged protagonists in their new feature film lineup. They wanted to look for people of color or women. I don't know if that was true or not, but to be honest, I was frankly relieved because I didn't think you could tell the story in 2 hours. I thought you needed a good 6, 8, 10 hours. And that might be a little grandiose on my part, but there's a lot of stuff in that book. So now we're reselling it only as a limited series or streaming series. But we also have, the documentary rights are available now too. And those are being negotiated possibly by a really impressive filmmaker who, if he does it, it'll be pretty incredible. He's talked to one of the major streamers, and we're waiting for a final decision.
Oh, I hope it goes through. I can't wait to see that. So there's a possibility then of US Department of Justice looking into the LA DA's office and LAPD's handling of the Manson case, which are based on your findings. What are your findings that have caused this?
Well, that's actually another thing that hasn't become definite yet, but it's getting closer and closer. An op-ed writer has written a piece demanding that the Justice Department look into just my discoveries in the Tate LaBianca investigation and trial, where I proved that there was a lot of shenanigans behind the scenes. Lawyers had been switched by the prosecution to the detriment of the defense. People's human civil rights were violated. And, again, everybody who, no matter what crime they commit, deserves a fair trial. And what I found out is that the DA's office protected more powerful people who were involved and behind these murders than the 5 people who went to prison for them. And this op-ed writer has actually, gotten the green light and written the op-ed. And we're waiting to hear if this national newspaper here in the United States is going to publish it. If they do, I think it could result. I mean, she's basically saying she's laying out my evidence and then her argument for why there's really nothing else to do than to reopen the case, also to look for the possible other murders, victims committed by the group.
So this mainstream story of Manson is that he was a cult leader. He had his followers hooked on drugs, including LSD. He motivated them to go out and do these horrific acts while, he stayed at the home base or wherever he was. But there's a much bigger picture, isn't there, of CIA involvement and how LSD got into the scene. Could you expand on the CIA's relationship?
Sure. Well, I mean, the history of CIA in the United States is it was originally brought over and used by military intelligence, Army, Navy, and the Central Intelligence Agency, who were experimenting first among, the recruits at their own camps and bases and prisoners, and then they took it out into the general population in a program that was called Mkultra that began in 1953. And for a minimum of 20 years, 63, 73, secret research was done on American citizens without their knowledge. LSD was tested and given to anyone from, again, prisoners to people who signed up for drug tests and didn't know what the drugs were. And also, in brothels in San Francisco and New York and Los Angeles, Johns were lured to apartments by prostitutes and then given LSD and then observed by scientists behind double mirrors in these apartments that were set up to look like bordellos. And that was done mostly in San Francisco, beginning in about 1964. And then in 1967, this one CIA scientist named Louis J. West, Jolly West, opened one of his own kind of projects in the Haight-Ashbury district. And during the same time that Manson formed the family there. And that's all kind of detailed in the book. I shouldn't get too much in the weeds if we don't have much time, but it's all part of a bigger picture of what the government was doing that, violated every Hippocratic and civil and criminal oath that a law enforcement person takes in the United States and beyond. This happened in Canada. And the U.S. would also take it over to foreign countries, usually Southeast Asia, where we were already involved in the Vietnam War, and test on those populations.
So what do you believe the CIA's role was then in the LSD supply of the 1960s to the hippie generation?
Well, I know that until some people who left the CIA or who had learned how to do it from their affiliation with the CIA started distributing themselves in the mid-60s, they were the only ones who had it. Then people learned how to synthesize it, and there were some famous guys in the Haight and Los Angeles and elsewhere, Oscar Janiger and Owsley, who were making it and actually giving it out for free. But the question is, does the CIA still control the purse strings on it? And they were the ones that really put it, ironically, into the mainstream population during what became known as the 60s and the revolutionary period, which was fueled by drugs, free sex, and love. I'm not saying this definitively, but I present a pretty good case in my book, I hope, might have been actually created by the United States, our own government.
So you're saying that Timothy Leary and Ken Casey were unwittingly part of that project?
Not so sure about Timothy Leary. I think Ken Casey was unwitting, but as far as unwitting, I'm not so sure about Leary. That whole story is a mystery to me. It's something I'm looking into possibly for if I do a second book. Just how much was he involved with the government's distribution and testing of the drug?
So we've had a few ex-CIA guys on, and they've made it clear that it's in the interests of national security and protecting the domestic population is the purpose of the agency. So what would the national security interest be by releasing all the LSD? How would that benefit America?
Well, if you look at it in the context of when this began in the 1950s, we were in the middle of a Cold War. And the United States learned that the Soviets and the Chinese had developed techniques to brainwash human beings using LSD, hypnotism, different drugs, isolation. And originally, the program began before MK Ultra. They had 2 or 3 other names for it: Bluebird, Artichoke. It was instituted as a defense program to learn how to prevent our soldiers on foreign soil from being captured and brainwashed, because the United States believed that happened during the Korean War in the early 50s. Eventually, when they learned how actually profoundly effective this was, they decided to make an offensive program where they learned how to do the same things they believed the Soviets and Chinese could do. And, you know, when all of it kind of came out into the public in 1974, 75 through 77, the CIA, once they kind of got caught at the hearings, testified under oath that yes, they had done this. Yes, it was covert. Yes, it was the most expensive program that they had ever been involved with to that point, and most secret, but nothing had been successful. It was silly. LSD was too uncontrollable. So it was really just a silly, you know, gang that couldn't shoot straight effort. But what I found in my research, on original documents from this one Dr. West, saying, no, it was very effective. In 1954, he reported that he had learned how to develop the technology to replace true memories with false ones permanently without a person's awareness. And that's like the golden calf, you know, to the CIA, because once you can do that, you really can do anything with the person's mind.
What was the method that they used to do that?
Well, that's it. He doesn't outline it in the paper I have, but I know that what he did was he used LSD, isolation, and hypnotism in combination. And there were other drugs that BZ or something that aren't named, but I had to kind of, you know, follow a path through other research. But it was mostly just a combination of drugs, hypnosis, and sensory isolation.
So as drug science has advanced dramatically since those decades, do you think that such experiments exist in this day and age?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and I hate to speculate because it's really pure speculation on my part, because I've never really looked into it. I'll just say I can't imagine that they would do what they did, which was, they said in '73 when they ended the program, they did destroy all the records. I know that, or they hid them in a really good place. But I can't imagine if they learned how to create these kinds of mind control weapons that they wouldn't still be using them. But I can't even begin to speculate on how. I know a lot of people out there do speculate on that, you know, with the mass shootings and whatnot. I'm just trying to stick to the 20 years or so of my own research. Maybe at another point, I'll look into more contemporary stuff.
So as you've been getting massive views and followings on the videos on social media, Tom, have people reached out to you with any other projects?
Yeah. I mean, that's the good thing. I mean, the book had a good reception when it came out in the summer of 2019, but it wasn't until I went on to one of your, I don't know if he's a competitor or not, or Joe Rogan's podcast. And I can't remember if I did you before or after.
That's a big one, isn't it, Rogan?
Yeah, he got me on there, and that kind of changed the entire trajectory of the book. So it sold a lot more. It got into a lot more people's hands. And especially since him, I hear, you know, from anywhere from a few to a few dozen people every day. 90% of them are crackpots, but 10% of them are really credible resource. I mean, it takes a long time to filter through, and there's a lot of back and forth, but I've got a half dozen people right now, some of them ex-military intelligence, a couple of, let's just say, very wealthy people with a lot of money and have invested a lot in getting these answers. I think more for hobbies than anything else, but I've got a lot of good new avenues of research and investigation open to me now. So I'm talking to my collaborator, Dan Piepenbring, who worked with me on the first book, about doing a second. And we're just trying, I mean, I can't do it alone because it'd be another 20 years. I need him to rein me in. So the only way I'll do it is if I get enough explosive, definitive answers, because I don't want to just regurgitate what I've already done. but I think I'm getting close. We're getting close.
When you spend years researching a subject and writing about it, as I've done with Escobar, it's like putting together a big jigsaw puzzle, I've found.
Yeah.
So in recent years, then, as you know, more book sales have come in and more people have seen your videos, have other people come forward to you that have made you revise things or filled in parts of that jigsaw that you had not previously filled in?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I even had to do corrections to the first book. So when you publish a hardcover, if the book is successful enough, then they'll release it again in paperback, and that's where you have the opportunity to do corrections. And you know, I was embarrassed, but mostly things like spellings and dates and stuff like that. Nothing really significant, but we have a lot of corrections in the paperback. So you can't even get the hardcover, but because during COVID, they stopped printing it because it wasn't considered an essential item. And that was kind of a mixed blessing of going on Rogan. I went on in April of 2020, and all of a sudden there was this massive demand for the book, but there were no books available. He sold out all the remaining copies just by announcing it. And then nobody could get it until June, until the paperback came out. So the paperback, I tell everybody to get if they're looking for a new copy. A lot of people like to listen to it, which I also listen to books, but I have 60 pages of footnotes that are really important. I mean, it shows my sourcing, it tells people where to look. And I think that's what's happening. A lot of people also are picking up kind of the stones or the pebbles I threw out there and going beyond. And they come to me with, have you seen this? Do you know that? And the internet has even changed in the 2 years since the book came out. There's much more stuff available. That's also dangerous, as you probably know, because there's so much crazy unsourced stuff on the internet, but just stuff like old newspaper articles, court documents. People come to me with that. I feel like I have 100 researchers working for me now, whereas before I was like this lonely guy in Venice in a bungalow, feeling like I didn't have a friend or a helper in the world. So it's nice.
So in the last year or so, since Rogan at least, with this army of internet sleuths, have you learned anything new that has surprised you?
Yeah, some things I missed. Again, I didn't get them wrong, but there were some things I missed that other people, but these people had invested a lot of time in them. That some stuff that people principal to my work had also done, but it's not in my book because I didn't find it. So that's you know, a half dozen of these guys who were circulating Manson and that group and the hate were doing a lot more stuff that I'm finding out now. And you know, it bleeds into other assassinations. I might have mentioned this the last time I was on your show, was that the Robert Kennedy assassination, I had done a lot of my own reporting on that, but there was just so much that we decided to hold it back from the book because the book would have been too long. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to use that in a second book as well. And there's a couple other kind of historic cases too.
What is your theory of the Robert Kennedy assassination?
Yeah, I believe that, you know, Sirhan didn't know how or why he got into the pantry at the Ambassador Hotel and shot at, which he did. He shot a gun at Kennedy, and there was a second gunman in that pantry. And, you know, I'm far from the first person to say that. And a lot of reputable people, you know, cops, intelligence people who've looked at the evidence believe that. I believe he was brainwashed, much the way the girls were brainwashed in the Manson family. And I'm hoping that as long as he's alive, which he's still in prison, and I think he has a parole hearing coming up at some point, maybe in the fall. As long as he's alive, it's much easier to kind of make a case for getting information from the government. They're not going to give it to you, but you get people who are dying, who are guilty because they know stuff, to come forward. Once they're dead, that kind of closes the door, unfortunately. And he's a healthy guy. I think he's probably in his early to mid 70s. So right now I've probably gotten him killed like Epstein or something by saying this. I hope not. I know that's another area you guys report on. I don't have any information about that.
Yeah, my new book's coming out in about a month or so. Who Killed Epstein, Prince Andrew or Bill Clinton?
I saw that. I like it. Now I don't know which side it was on, but I should vote. Yeah, looks good.
So we've about 5 minutes left, and we've got a load of questions have come in from the viewers for you, Tom. So the first one, is there a name or reference for the replacing of memories that CIA are allegedly capable of? That's from Amanda. Thanks, Amanda.
Is there a name like I don't think so. I mean, you mean like a code name or?
Is there a name or reference for the replacing of memories? I imagine like a phrase they use perhaps for that.
Not that I know of. I mean, I've got, quite a few pages on it in my book where I quote from the documents I have, and the language is just pretty simple. It was Jolly West's own words saying that he has developed the technology to remove true memories, replace them with false. I don't know if they ever gave it some kind of operational name.
And you've got new information on Timothy McVeigh?
Yeah. I mean, I knew that there was a lot of rumors out there that West had gotten involved with Timothy McVeigh. And if people in your audience don't know, he was the Oklahoma City bomber who was, prior to 9/11, responsible for the biggest mass murder in United States history, well, after the Indians. And he was executed shortly after, but West, I'm not promoting my book, but I also write about my book about West's manipulation of Jack Ruby, who killed Oswald and then died a couple years later after being convicted. And West mysteriously became Ruby's psychiatrist right before he was going to testify to the Warren Commission. And the day that West started treating him, Ruby lost his mind. Well, West had the same relationship with Timothy McVeigh. And I'm hoping to talk to a bunch of people that were involved in the case who've never spoken before, who can provide documents to show that this was something West did for, the better part of four decades, getting involved in these notorious cases. Also the Patty Hearst case, who was kidnapped by the Symbionese Lebanese. I'm sorry, I didn't pronounce it right now. I'm talking too fast. The SLA.
Yeah, these are all absolutely fascinating cases that we could really speak at length on. Amanda, who asked the question earlier, which causes some confusion, has added, I was asking for the name of the tech, like V2K.
I don't know what V2K is.
I think it's some kind of spy slang. Okay, let's move on to the next question from Momzilla. Do you know about the current lawsuit by Montrealers against CIA, Allen Memorial Hospital, and the Canadian government for Mkultra experiments?
Yes. That's been going on for quite a while. One of the people involved in the lawsuit contacted me. There was a great podcast on it where they spoke to some of Ewan Cameron was the name of the psychiatrist who worked for the Mkultra operation and did absolutely horrific experiments with his patients where he'd give them LSD daily, and he did what they call patterning. They would hear these recordings over and over in their head. And the government of Canada has already awarded some of the victims a substantial sum of money. I think that was in like the 80s, which didn't allow them to make another claim against the government, but they've somehow learned a way to do it because they should have gotten a lot more money. And I wish I could remember the name of the podcast that came out, but it was a couple Canadian journalists who interviewed some of the victims, their family members, and even Ewan Cameron, who died a long time ago, his son. And it's an incredible story. And I do think that they'll prevail. I hope there's media coverage. I think it's kind of stalled right now. I'm not sure if it's because of COVID or what, but I know it's ongoing.
Huge thank you for coming on, Tom. We've run out of time. I'll put all your links in the description box below the video, your books and everything else. Is there a preferred method people can contact you? Yeah.
I have I think you have it on there, my WordPress website page, which has my email address, trmo@aol.com. I'm very old school. And I don't want to drop a name, but I've been talking to Quentin Tarantino, and he reached out to me a few months ago because it took him that long to have time to read my book. And he also is an AOL user. So I tell that to all my young friends who call me a boomer or whatever. I say, hey, man, Tarantino's cool enough to use AOL. So that's, they can contact me that way. And I have Instagram and Facebook, and they can message me or DM. I'm still learning how to use the social media, but I also have a lot of documents and videos up on my Instagram and Facebook pages for the book, which you have links to.
Absolutely brilliant. If you make any plans to come out to London, let us know. We'd love to interview in the studio properly.
Oh, great. Great. And good luck with your book, Shaun.
Thanks, Tom. You have a great rest of your Wednesday then.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Cheers.
care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.